Welcome. This is Dr. Alana James, and this is the 5th in a series of webinars about getting published. Glad you could join us either in person or by recording. It's good to remember this quote, and we're going to see it again later on, I believe, because it's so good to remember that every successful piece of nonfiction should leave the reader with one provocative thought that he or she didn't have before. Not 2 thoughts or 5 thoughts, just one. So decide what single point you want to leave in the reader's mind. And we're going to have that as a thread that runs through our discussion today. And we'll see some more quotes by William Zinsser, who is, in my opinion, one of the best writers ever on writing. So our goal is for the whole set of sessions is that by the end of August, for those of you who are joining us in the first session, we're going to have something ready to go off to the publisher. For those of you who have been watching this series by recordings, it's about 3 to 3.5 months work to go through all the topics and to keep continually working on getting an article ready for publication. Our goals for today are a few little tricks that came from Microsoft Word, and then we're going to have some examples about some things that have been developing and how that can move your writing further. So I hope everybody leaves today with some new ideas and a good sense of, oh yeah, it's not as mysterious as I thought, and yes, I can get that done. So our agenda is to revise, read out loud, revise again. That's our homework. And we're going to talk a little bit about how I found some interesting things in Microsoft Word that helped me do that pattern, work that pattern. We're going to look at some homework, and then we're going to refocus on how to take it from, I finished it, I've got it all written, maybe I've done 1 or more rewrites, and then to what it takes to be a final document, with the idea that we'll do that series for this next bit of time, and that at least some of us will have a final document ready to go and look at one last time. Now, let me ask Fabio, who's in the room, how is your writing going right now? Has it been successful up until this point? Do you have something fleshed out? Have you run into any particular challenges? And that's, so he's been working on a paper. Do you have a whole paper, or, oh, that you have to present? Yes, okay. Well, and then will that paper turn into something written for a journal, or is it a separate kind of thing that has to be done first? Oh, very good. Good. All right. So excellent. And perhaps we'll see it next week, next session. That would be excellent. So things are progressing at one end. For those of you who may be watching by recording, by now, everybody who's been working, some are pretty well caught up. Some are having difficulty getting there. I would say just keep watching the recordings. Just keep fleshing these ideas through your mind, and in their own perfect process, they will follow through. So today we're talking about the writing process. Change happens throughout the writing process, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how that happened in my work and how it worked in MS Word. Okay, so first thing about Microsoft Word, if you aren't using it with the navigation pane or document map open, start to do that immediately. There would be 2 things I would always have on. I would always have the document map or navigation pane open, and I would always be putting my headings in using Word's system of headings, which is under the Home tab. And I would always have that little mark that's a paragraph mark on. And that results in, if you look at the slide on the screen, that results in these little, like it says, set in italic, the thin rules above, and then there's that funny little mark. And you can't see it on the slide, but on my screen, you can see one dot for every space. And I also have all of my tools turned up. So Word is helping me write better right away by helping me correct my spelling and my grammar issues as I go. Now, this having the navigation pane open, last time we talked about the funnel and how this document, the purpose is to funnel your reader through to the point you want to make. And I originally drew out, you'll see it changes as it goes along, but my original funnel looked like this, and I had it in a PowerPoint slide that I gave all of you as a handout last time, so you too could make your own PowerPoint slides. And I just took a screen capture of that and put it in the place of where the abstract is, because at the end, the abstract really tells the reader how they're going to be funneled. So it's a good place to hold it. Then I went about my process and I built my first set of headings, and I took a look at whether or not they were actually going to get me to the places I wanted people to go in the funnel. And I wasn't very pleased with this. So it went on to become this. So you'll see that now there's a better synchronicity between my ideas of where I'm going and how the headings are going to take me there. And I began to see that there was this idea of challenge was a big one, and it had several subheadings. So there's now in my headings a better flow, and you better have a flow that matches where you want it to go. And if your headings do a very good job of that, I have found, for me anyway, when my headings do a very good job of taking me through what's going to go on, my writing flows much more easily. And then they changed again, because I realized that in this one section that I, instead didn't have 4 challenges, really had 3 challenges, and one of the ones that had been a challenge actually was a subtopic. And that tightened up. This is kind of like the fine-tuning of tightening. Now, also, as you begin to write, you'll have this issue with drift. When we come to writing, we know a lot of things. And so we have an idea of how we're going. And invariably, my mind starts to add in things, other issues, other concepts and challenges and theoretical components that I know of. That's called drift. Sometimes it's useful and very excellent. Sometimes you should follow it, but you should always be aware of it, and you should always question it. So in this case, writing about a fully functioning university, I found myself in several places making note back to some seminal work in organizational development by a couple of authors, Bowman and Deal. I think it's good at this point. My idea is that it's probably going to stay, and that I'm going to have to make changes. Those changes are coming in this Will It Work section, and I'm going to have to refer back to that up here in the introduction and the beginning in order to pull it off to make it come all the way through. Now, this impinges or is a tertiary idea to a concept called the golden thread that we refer to a lot. And what the golden thread means is that you have an outcome you want your reader to have. It's the thread you want everything to tie to. But, you know, some threads are gold and others are silver, and that you may have some structural elements that go all the way through, or some theoretical elements, or some conceptual elements. And in this case, it's a conceptual element. And if it is, and if it's key to your end game, it also probably needs to be introduced in your beginning section. So just to keep in mind always that these threads of ideas, as you weave them together to become the single strand that your reader wants to take away, you need to make sure that they are introduced and driven through. All of these things happen in iterative fashion. So none of us write from beginning to end and it's done. And it's not even as simple as beginning to end, it's done with revisions. But it's always like, I'm going to revise the whole thing. I'm going to revise the whole thing. No, it's much more critically focused than that. And I'll get in a minute to a series of ideas that you might take on board about how it can proceed. So finally, the last thing I want to say about navigation pane is that it's a good place to look for redundancies. If a long document, now you won't find it so much in a journal article, which is maybe 4,000 words, but in a thesis or dissertation, which is maybe 200 pages, one of the biggest challenges is not being redundant, or being redundant in a structured way, as in constantly reminding your reader at the beginning of each chapter where they're going, and those sections are often redundant, but at least they repeat each other in a way that sets up a pattern that keeps your reader going, rather than a pattern that makes your reader say, oh, I've read this before, I want to drop out. So to take a look at, to be critically aware of what your navigation pane is telling you, and to ask questions like, well, is this really a subheading of this? And am I mentioning something over and over again? And where should it really go? All right. Fabio is bringing up the fact that he uses a different tool. Let's open it now. It's www.overleaf.com. It's a brand new to me, collaborative writing and publishing tool. At the end of the day, it does not matter what tool you write in, except that your publisher is going to expect your paper to arrive in a certain format. So in the general world, Microsoft Word and saving from Word into PDFs is useful. And Word is now, if you are using the 365 version that is current, quite collaborative. My guess is it's going to be hard for any of the new things to take off in a very big way across the world because Microsoft owns the space so much. But that's really the challenge of business, not the challenge for us. For us, as long as it does the formatting you need it to do, as long as you can get templates in your that use the kind of style manual that you use. So is there things I would look for when I was looking at a tool would be, is there an APA template? Is there a dissertation or thesis template? There is a template for academic journal in this tool, but I don't know what it does. It's not clear immediately what it does for style. Those are the kinds of considerations. How is it going to help you set up your writing, your references, etc.? Now, Microsoft Word has advanced enormously in all the years that I've used it, but I still don't use it for references, although some people do. I use EndNote for references. And so those are choices we all have to make. And there are so many tools now. So look around, look at your pocketbook, decide which one you want long-term. The longer you can, the only thing I have to say is that from experience, the longer you can stay with one tool, the less headache you have as you have to embrace a new tool. But Fabio says that this tool has been excellent. He can organize things the way he wants to, and the journals in his department use it, so it's a standard. And that's, at the end of the day, what will constrain us the most. And as we move from one organization to another, those standards will change. So if this one, if Overleaf is a standard, then absolutely, you absolutely don't even question it. Use the tools that your program is using. Sometimes they will give you analysis tools as well. Almost everybody has SPSS, but when it comes to qualitative analysis, different departments have different tools. Again, you use what's available. If somebody says, and then you just have to get used to it, is what Fabio says, and that's right. You just have to kind of go with it. If you're lucky enough to be an independent, you get to choose, and you get to stay with what you choose. Looking at revision then is this big question for today. And rewriting is the essence of writing. Well, it's where the game is won or lost. That idea is hard to accept. We all have an emotional equity in our first draft. We can't believe that it wasn't born perfect, but the odds are close to 100% that it isn't. I'd say pretty much dead on 100% that it isn't. And in those of us who exist in a world of peer review, we have to get over the emotional equity piece real quickly, because we have to see our reviewers' comments as being for our own good. And when we do this enough, we absolutely know that that's true. So, yeah, rewriting is the essence of it all, and that's what we're into now. So this was a process that I was, I believe in keeping a writing journal, noting kind of how things are changing. It's, in a sense, this Let's Get Published seminar has been my journal for this time, because I've been reporting out how it was going. But I think everyone should do something that reports your changes to yourself. And the reason for that is that you may want to rework a system later. You may want to come back a year later and do it again, and it will remind you of what the last year was like. And it allows you to celebrate. And I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Celebration is good. So last week we designed our funnel. So I designed my funnel. I wrote my headings. You've seen that process. I checked one against the other. I began to write. And immediately I started noticing that there were areas that just weren't flowing. So I went back and I reconsidered the funnel, the headings, the ideas, and I reworked the alignment. And then I wrote the whole thing. And that's actually where I am right now. I have a few of the whole thing written. I have at a decent, so I'd say a draft and a half. I've read it over. When I write very quickly. My point is to get my ideas down, not to make it perfect. So I ignore a lot of things that little voice that used to interrupt my writing to say, oh, is this right? Oh, should I have said that? That voice has just shut up a long time ago with me. So I just write. And that means that my first draft is pretty rough. And then I go back and I rework that, asking myself, what is it I really want to say? And what might be the structure I want to say it through? And then I add references. Now, I might put a few in as I say the first couple of times, but I may be different than other academics in that. But I found in my own writing career that it's important. My most important thing is that my voice is in this document. And if I get too tied up with other people's voices, sometimes it takes so much longer to write because I'm kind of chasing my own tail. So it's best for me to get my ideas straight through the funnel, just like it makes sense to me. And then I go back and I look. I have a lot of lit. and I know my subject really well. So I'm not concerned about whether or not I can back up what I say enough to make it academic. And so I go back and add my references and really consider how other people's ideas play into what I do on a second or third go round. So I'll do that next. And then I'll reconsider my main point. I'll read it again with the idea of, does everything here really add up to that one main point? Because sometimes when you add in your references, you're adding in other people's points and they may actually get in your way. So you have to consider that. We have to be very critical and able to analyze our own writing. And then finally, we rewrite again. And that rewrite again can go on. You can pass it to somebody else. You can read it out loud. You can do have the computer read it to you. However it is, every time you go through it, it's useful to have to go through it in a slightly different format. Okay, so another later, this is true for later rewrites. So you've got your basics, you've got your stuff, and then towards the end, you want to do this. This is the craft of writing. The secret of good writing is to strip every sentence to its cleanest components. Every word that serves no function, every long word that could be a short word, every adverb that carries the same meaning that's already in the verb, these are 1001 adulterants that weaken the strength of a sentence. Okay, so now we're on. Elena, welcome. And do either of you have any from that? Does this sync with your experience as you're writing, or have you had a different experience that you would like to share? And so far, so good. We have 2 handouts today, and I'm opening them myself. We're going to do what's on the first one we're going to look at is from student 4-5. And then we'll look, if we have time and if it's interesting, we'll look at least the notes of what I was going to do next. So, and I greatly appreciate everyone who sends in a document for this. We take off your names, we make you anonymous, but it's useful, really useful for people to see other people's process. So this first one from a student for 5 came with a note. I know this is very rough, but I want to send you what I have. I used the structure I created in session 3 and added the text from my dissertation addendum. It's all I have right now since I'm working on collecting the data for this chapter, but I think the exercise is still important. I can fill in the gaps into this framework once I have all of the data collected and analyzed. So at this point, this is a really usual way, especially for someone who's finishing a thesis who also wants to get a journal article going, to work. That you put in what you have and it's a little rough around the edges and you know it's rough, and then you put it together. So let's just go through this sort of quickly from the point of view of the reader in terms of whether it does what it's supposed to do in each section. Raise your hand if you're in the room if that would be useful. Fabio thinks it would be useful. Elena either might not think it's going to be useful. Elena, is there something else you'd prefer to see? It's also possible she's in a place where she can't respond. Fully conscious that a lot of you attend when you're in working situations that aren't as easy. So unless I see something come in from her, I'm going to assume this is at least a good way to get us started on this document. We leave the abstract till last. So looking at the introduction, he's going to open with introducing a previous study on which his or her work, I'm just going to say her, makes it easier, work was based or was relevant. And then go into the research questions to be answered, which are, in this case, is there a multi-criteria approach? Is this multi-criteria approach a more beneficial method to make decommissioning decisions than the current approach used by U.S. federal and state governments? And is this a viable and more beneficial option? Can the model be replicated elsewhere? So just a couple of comments on that. Of course, we're going to learn about the whole introduction is a study by Fowler, and it's going to introduce us to what is meant by a multi-criteria approach of decommissioning decisions. Actually, my issue is with the research question. The second research question is 2 questions. Is this viable is one question, and is it more beneficial is another question. That we would measure data that would not put them together in most cases. So I'm always open to the fact that I make these broad statements and then a specific case makes what I just said completely untrue. But by and large, when we look at research questions, one of the first things that we drill into is one set of data going to answer this question, and are you in fact asking 2 different things, which I think this second one is. So then it goes into background information. That might be a good heading. Recent communication determined that an initial approach to this research did not provide a strong enough result to continue the pursuit of the original ideas. Dr. Fowler and his colleagues recently published a paper highlighting an approach to answering some of the more difficult questions in the United States globally. So there's a lot of cut and paste here, which is again, this person said that cut and paste came from her work. So it's her cut and paste. But nevertheless, whenever we cut and paste something in that was written for a different master, if you would, than what you're putting in now, a way of making that work smoothly is to be really clear on what the point is in each paragraph. A paragraph should make one point. So if we take the paragraph, the final outcome or solution to a particular scenario in a decommissioning decision is a collective answer utilizing all involved. There is no limit to ranking system input. In fact, more scores that are received, the more solid and transparent the answer becomes. So that's a statement. The point of that is that with using this tool, you don't have limits, and that the final outcome drives the solution. I think I have that right. So that's what you're putting down, is you're looking at each paragraph, and off to the side, and this can be done in I'm going to use Microsoft Word as an example, but you can put in a comment in most collaborative tools. So I would go through all of my paragraphs in a previous document that I was thinking about transferring into my new one, and I would real quickly, it takes very little time, put in a comment that has the point of this paragraph, the point, the point, the point, the point. Then in my new setting, I can choose to transfer the paragraphs that make the points in the order that makes sense for the new document. And what I'm trying to say here is to point out that every document you write has its own internal funnel. And from my experience, it has taken me longer to rework a previous funnel into a new place than it has to write it from scratch. So given that sometimes it's great to cut and paste whole sections, make really sure that the points in those sections still hold true, and that will make your cut and paste better. So this new document is going to give us a lot of introduction about these decommissioning plans, and then the multi-criteria approach to decommissioning is the next heading, and it's a lit review. And here is a bulleted beginning, opening with a description and a matrix describing what the matrix is. That brings us to the options, justifying the options with appropriate citations, and then looking at the selection criteria for that, identifying why this is an important component, discussing performance scoring and criteria weighting, explaining scoring process and criteria weighting, and coming to the overall evaluation. This is very nice. I hope you can hear it's like a ladder of ideas, overarching ideas and then specific. But you can get a sense that the reader could easily follow this pattern, and the overall point would be a better understanding of multi-criteria approach to decommissioning and the evaluation of it. So that's excellent, because you've helped your reader understand the main points and collect in their own mind their own criteria for examination. Then you go into your own beginning to have outcomes. So implementing this particular approach in the Gulf of Mexico. And so now it's a discussion of the methods that collected the data upon which this article is written. So some specific offshore oil and gas platforms were chosen. Here's the way they were done, the selection process, and then using that, the Fowler background will be redeveloped, if you would, for this, for the selected cases, and a focus group was created or will be created that will rank the options. So that's how this approach is used in the Gulf of Mexico. And then again, the data analysis will determine the best option based on the ranking. Expert opinion performance evaluations will be discussed, explain similar context, and how these experts were chosen. So then a discussion of who participated, explain the similar terms, and that takes this author into the research requirements. And then case studies. And so now there's a discussion of the case studies. There will, after that, obviously it's drilling into the conclusions. And then there may be, not decided yet, a recommendation section. Academics use the term recommendation. Most of the rest of the world uses call to action. But if you have the power of a strong case and you have personally feelings about how people should behave or what is good for your field, then a recommendation section is really interesting and useful, because it can be the place where your voice just really comes through. And one of the challenges of new academic writers is that dance that we all have to do between being in our powerful voice and making points that are important to us and stay within the parameters. So I always recommend a recommendation section if you can do it, and it comes out well. I like to read them myself, and oftentimes they're the most engaged part of the writing. And then it goes on to the rest, there's a hypothesis, there's some notes that the author has written about what to revisit. Oh, Fabio, the example I'm referring to is a handout. Apologies for that. I thought I was clear. 2 handouts, and the one I just went through, so I'll give you a minute to go through it on your own, is the one that's entitled From Student 4-5. Good. Oh, no problem. Mine was, and apologies to anybody else who didn't. So one research question or two, then the lot of cut and paste, which brought up my conversation about the difficulties or challenges in cutting from one kind of document into another. But then I read through the bullet points and headings as documented so far, and we saw a good back and forth. And I can believe that this is going, I can't see it all yet, of course. And there's some question about how well the case studies back up the points made at the beginning and tie into the points made at the end. But that's always the case until we actually see the whole thing. It's a believable structure. The headings that are in place make sense so far. It seems like this author, this is exactly the kind of document I would expect to see come out of someone as they were beginning to get started. So hopefully others who have documents who look very much like that will also feel supported. Like, yes, you really are on the right track. It's a difficult period of time when you, and so bravo to this person. Yes, Elena, I am. Bravo to this person because they brought it in at this particular time. So yeah, it's good. It will be good. And there may be difficulty rewriting the cut and paste section, and a big challenge may be the way weaving the case study in a convincing fashion to build the overall point that this other way of looking at decommissioning is stronger. But it looks like they have pretty good data from the Gulf of Mexico. So now I'll turn it over to the people in the room. Do you have questions? We have about 15 minutes left. And I want to make sure that when you think about your own work, if you were to go over what you have right now, is it on task? Does it seem right? Does this last slide does it make sense about what you might do next? Consider once you have the whole document, about halfway through, if this were 10 points, about 5 would be having the document done. And too often, I think beginning writers think in terms of the document's done and then I rewrite it and maybe a couple of times and then I'm done. And actually, I think there is as much shift and change from the document being done till the time it's finished as there is anything else. Please, in the end, tell me how to send a copy of my paper for comparison. Absolutely. In fact, Fabio, right now, we have enough time, I think. If you have one, the fastest way to get it to me is my personal account, because of course Gmail brings it in. So send it right now. And we'll use the mysteries of the web. Tell me when it's there. Tell me when I should refresh. You're probably madly copying and pasting. Elena, did you have any particular questions you wanted me to address prior to, well, Fabio's getting his document off to me? If not, we'll take a little. Yeah, good. Very good. All right, now it's sent. And I'm refreshing. If Gmail's on its way, it'll be here. Well, it didn't come right then. Let's see how fast these servers will be. Gmail's usually, there you go. Okay, now, oh, and it's a PDF. That's very handy. So it's going down into the right place. And then we'll upload it to BigMarker. And that will allow Elena to have it as well. And as that's being uploaded, I'll open my copy. Oh, it's already in 2 columns and formatted for the journal, which is excellent. When you see one like this, you know that it's very close to finished. Is finished? Is it already gone off? Just so we know what the context here is. Not yet. Okay. Let's read the abstract. This paper explores the benefits of using MPTCP, Multipath TCP, as a resource to an adaptive AR/VR content delivery development. For that purpose, it analyzes 2 approaches that address inherent multipath characteristics of an MPTCP technology. The first approach is the establishment of VPC, Virtual Private Channel algorithm, to deliver specific data using a fixed subflow. The second approach develops a QoSF on-the-fly algorithm that evaluates in near real time the subflow's RTT round-trip time performance, suggests the best subflow to deliver content with the lowest latency. Both algorithms are assessed in a single homed and multi-homed configurations and present different RTT performance improvements depending on the configuration and traffic's characteristics. While The QoSF algorithm presents the best performance in scenarios where the RTT variation between subflows is high. The VPC algorithm presents a better performance in scenarios where this variation is smaller. More details about the RTT performance improvement and their applicability is discussed in detail. All right, now my comment on the, first off, excellent abstract in that this is my field. I really quickly get what these people are saying and doing, and I know instantly from reading the abstract if it's something that fits my work closely enough to be worth my time, or if it is where it fits in how I will use it. And you have to remember that your reader is interested in where this is going to fit in their world. So the point of your abstract, which we'll discuss in depth next time, is to give your reader that information in as quickly and easily a way possible. The other comment I have is that I'm not sure, unless it's industry specific, but in all parts of the academic world that I'm aware of, you spell out the full thing and then you put the acronym in next. So even though you're going to use MPTCP throughout, the first time it's used, it's multipath TCP, and MPTCP is the thing in parentheses. And that would be the same throughout the way this is written. These authors put in the acronym and then in parentheses put the full reading, which I have never actually seen done that way. So it is wrong. I don't know. It depends upon the field that we're in. But I think it might be. Okay, so then it goes, now we're in the writing. And the authors have not spelled it out in the writing. So you need to, I'm positive about this, whichever decision these authors are going to make, the first time they use ARVR, it needs to be spelled out and then ARVR. We don't use acronyms without giving a reader who doesn't understand them at all a chance to understand them. And the more acronyms we use, the less likely our writing can be read by a more average person. So we only use them when we're absolutely sure that we want to be that fine-tuned, or that and take a good look at everything this journal publishes. Is it all like this? Is it an acronym central? Then you'll be okay. But if it's, one of my dear friends that writes for us is a 15-year journal editor, and she hates jargon. She hates what people do with jargon. She hates the whole acronym thing. And so I think it might be more common than not. So that would be just a comment. Now let's look at how it flows. So we have the introduction, and it takes us through some recent developments and best practice standards changing, and the fact that there's a broad range, there's some initiatives that need to be considered. And then there's the relevance of it and the performance requirements, and then how 5G networks are going to affect it. And so it's building a case for AR/VR as a topic area. Seems to be very strong. And it tells us how the paper is organized. Very nice, tight introduction. Related works. So now that would be how things are going on with MPTCP. And this looks to be, this is stand in for a lit review as to what other things are going on. And without it being my field and reading it in depth, I'm just going to take it for granted that all of those things in there actually have importance in this particular document's golden thread. It looks a little bit like it's a review of these are all the things that are going on, and that always brings questions in a reader's mind. Do I need to have this? Do I need to have this to understand your document? But it's not my field, and I don't have time to go through it in depth. So we'll just assume all that's good. Then it goes through MPTCP structure, and it does nice diagrams, helping the reader understand things, adaptive AR delivery, again with some show things. So giving the reader the very best opportunity to understand what may be new information and therefore difficult to take in. And also they're backing it up with data. And then they're looking at the other algorithm, and they're going into criteria about why you would use one or the other. They're doing exactly what their abstract says they're going to do, which is all good. And then they go into the simulation-based testing. So this is their data from their research. This is their methodology and data. It's very nice. Well done. And then the final conclusion is that basically one works in one setting and one works in another setting. And so if this was my field, it's tight, it's focused, and I would not have spent too much time to get to the information I needed. And they let me know exactly what I was getting when I went there. So Fabio, I would say well done. And other than the fact that you have to really sort out that acronym issue and make sure that you always, that just because you put it in the right thing in parentheses, oh no, it's not too technical, it's just your field. Every field drills into this. Again though, your field is every field also has a broader base of readership than they necessarily acknowledge. And so as authors, we need to really pay attention to that. And our world of when do academics get really, let me ask, I think this is the way to put it. When do academics get really well known, so well known that they become keynote speakers? It happens almost always when they write for the common purpose. So we have, I'm going to use Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, 25 years of psychological data on flow. But when he wrote Flow and the world picked it up, his work became internationally known in a broader sense that it actually had impact on the world. And there's millions of opportunities to talk about that. I know the ones in psychology best, Seligman in positive psychology, et cetera, et cetera. So when our work and our research in our academic lives, we are trained to think clearly. And that's a very valuable asset, and it's a leadership asset. So when we take those aspects and we write for everybody, then everybody pays attention, and it's interesting to them because we will have thought out our ideas very carefully. That's what research makes us do. So it's something to keep in mind. And I don't care what our field is. We should be very conscious when we write of who are our readers, and can we expand that readership a little by changing the way we language things with it. Okay. It's a good session today, I think. Let me just see what else the slides have to show us. Homework for next time is to keep doing it. Keep a journal so you can notate your changes. And then what I wanted to say about celebration, I need, for instance, using the stuff I showed you at the beginning, to celebrate the fact that through this process, I have honed a lot of ideas. And somebody in another webinar said that every time she rewrites her iteration, the next iteration, her language, her ideas, her theoretical background all upscale. And so we need to celebrate the upscale part of the process, because as our writing changes, we are changing too. So all of this is very much a self-development process. Remembering that where you're heading, what's your single point. The single point of Fabio's paper is that which one of these you use depends upon where you want to go for outcomes. He's given the choice points. If you have this, you do this. If you have this, you do this. That's the single point, is that there's a choice here, and this is what your choice is based on. What is the golden thread to your ideas? Prior to thinking anything is finished, you need to really pass your document off to someone else. Ask them what the point is. And if they come close, good for you. And if they don't, you still need to rewrite. Remembering again that every single piece of nonfiction should leave the reader with one provocative thought that she or he didn't have before, not 2 thoughts or 5. So decide what's on your mind. Okay, that's it for today. Beer. Fabio gets to celebrate. Right. And it is a drilled in. That was a collaborative piece. And the whole collaborative writing process is a thing into itself, isn't it, Fabio? Can you, on our way out the door, tell us something about how that collaboration went? And then we'll call it a day. You're always easy to do, Elena. Thank you for coming. Good. See you again soon. No final words on collaboration then. We'll let that go. So everybody, I'm closing down the recording. I hope it was useful to you. And the handouts will all be packaged with the recording. And next